Maria Marsh from Cambridge University Press to say a few things. Maria is the African Middle Eastern Studies editor and has previously worked at IP Tourist, and so she's the kind of person we have to get past to get our stuff published in books. So hopefully she'll be able to give us kind of another perspective on all of this. So thank you.
So I look after the African and Middle Eastern Studies lists at CUP, and so I'm what's called the commissioning editor there, and so I'm the sort of first point of contact for when you're sort of applying to submit your proposals. Like Ian was saying, the first point that you should do is once you've got the PhD. I know there were a lot of questions about potentially publishing before you sort of receive the PhD, but with a book, and I'm going to talk about books mostly, I work with books, I very rarely have anything to do with the journals, so, but with a book you really ought to have a PhD at Cambridge University Press. I know other places are different, and I know in my previous role as the Middle East editor at IP Tourist Publishers, there's a slight difference there as well because of the market that you're trying to reach. But anyway, so doing the research for which publication, which publishing house you want to approach is really important at that stage. It's to do with what market you're going to be reaching. Is it just going to be a conversion of the PhD thesis that you're publishing? Is it going to be something slightly different? And you want to know what kind of publishing house is going to be able to do the best job with your book as well. There are a wide variety of them, and different ones have sort of slightly different lists. And I know somewhere like Edinburgh has an extremely good Arabic literature list. Somewhere like Routledge does a slightly different Middle Eastern Studies list. And then again, somewhere like Cambridge has a slightly different one as well. So you want to take a look and see what kind of ways your book could fall into the wider list. One of the problems, and I think one of the downfalls of what a lot of people do when they submit a proposal is to say, nothing else has been ever written like my book. Mine is completely unique. And that actually causes problems for us because it means that we don't have a way of being able to place that. We don't have a way of being able to get behind that properly. So what you will actually want is for your book to fall within a sort of a little stable of different ones that are quite similar, and that means we can do the best job with you in that. So you're doing your research, you're looking up all the different publishing houses, and like Ian said, dropping a line to the commissioning editor saying, hey, this is my research, what do you think? Would you be interested in me submitting a proposal? Is really encouraged, because that shows to us as well that you've been doing your research and that you've been sort of thinking about how to properly place your book within the job market. Your book within the job market, your book within the book market. And so you're submitting your proposal, and afterwards, the commissioning editor has said, yes, go ahead, these are the guidelines for the proposal, or this is the form for the proposal. Do's and don'ts on that front, I would say, like Ian said, cut out the jargon. Despite having worked in Middle Eastern publishing for a while, I'm not a specialist on your level. I don't want to read about your jargon or Foucault or anything like that. I want to be able to understand how this book can get the widest possible audience. That's what we're in the business of, is making sure that your book gets the widest possible readership, gets the widest possible attention, has the widest possible impact. And by making it extremely narrow, by having extremely specific language or a specific case study, that does make it difficult for us. Now, I know what I'm saying here is completely contradicting what your PhD advisors are saying. Be specific, find your subject area, make yourself a specialist in that. And then I'm coming here saying, no literature review, none of that. I want it to be able to be sort of within the wider context. And that's where the conversion process comes in. And you want to be thinking about that when you're doing a proposal. You want to be thinking about how it can be put within the context of your wider field, how it can have the biggest impact for the wider field when you're doing a proposal. Like I said, don't write that it's the only one of its kind. Talk about how it feeds into the wider literature. Talk about how it can be sort of cross-marketed to different fields. Because for us, that means it's got a wider market, and that's something that we're interested in. So when you're doing the proposal, what you want to have in mind is the readership to whom you're submitting this proposal. When you're doing the proposal, think about who's going to be reading it. I mean, it's going to be sales and marketing at the publishing house, as well as the potential referees. So you want to have those two people in mind. And that's why I'm saying being overly jargony or overly specific is probably not going to help it. So once the proposals come in, I'll be taking a look over that. I might be consulting with internal colleagues on that. And for a first book, we usually ask to have the entire manuscript in before we start the review process, which does, in the long run, save time. So once the full manuscript has come in, I would then send it out to 2, maybe 3 reviewers. Like Ian was saying, these are external reviewers over whom I have no control over their timetables. If I did, that would be amazing, because then you could say, in 6 weeks, and you would get it in 6 weeks. Sadly, you all know your peers better than I do. 6 weeks is not always 6 weeks, and 2 months is not always 2 months. But after that deadline, we would start chasing the reviews. And after the reviews have come in, I mean, the review process is very similar to what Ian was saying, in that you might get one that thinks it's great, you might get another that thinks it's awful, and then it's got to go out to number 3 for their opinion as well. But once it's come in I'm talking in terms of Cambridge University Press here specifically. Once those reviews have come in, everything would then go to our sales and marketing teams. And it's at that point the strategy for the book gets decided. And that's when I'm saying you want your proposal to be able to be read by people who quite frankly don't care about the subject matter. They care about sales of books. So you want to be able to have like a single marketing hook or a single marketing line that these sales and marketing reps could go out to librarians, to Waterstones, to Barnes & Noble and say, this is the one line about this book. And it's because it's that kind of sort of almost an elevator pitch moment that you want to be able to say why it's good and why it should be taken on for publication. So once that's done, at that point we would be offering you a contract, and then it would then go on to sort of to the further production processes. And I think that once it's published, I think what Ian was saying about you trying to get involved in marketing, we are really happy for you to get involved in marketing. In fact, it's really important for the author to get involved. It makes a difference when someone is behind their book and is pushing it and is at talks and is talking about it in a presentable way. That makes all the difference, because you're putting a personality behind the book, so to speak, and that's really important for getting it out there and making sure that a wide number of people hear about your book, talk about it, recommend it to their librarians, put it on the reading lists, because that's what we're all after at the end of the day, is for the widest number of people to know about your book, for it to have an impact, and to put it on the reading lists and make it have a long life in the way that Ian's book has had. I'm not sure I can say much more else, because each book is very specific. Each one has a very specific life, and each one is has its own sort of problems and highlights of its own. So I think it would be more useful for me to take questions rather than carry on with a sort of spiel about the publishing process. So,
questions for Maria then?
What percentage of the applicants that you get end up being published by CUP?
Well, so that depends. The review process is quite stringent, and I would say it's probably about 50% at the moment. There's a lot to get through, and also it's about deciding whether it quite fits in with the direction of the list. So that's the sort of the initial decision that you make when you've been initially approached, and then once it gets to reviews, that's at the stage.
Yes. Publication of our chapters from our PhD thesis, to what extent it affects your decision on publishing our PhD as a book?
Okay, yes, no, I did want to address that because I think there were questions about dividing up the thesis into chapters for journals.
Yeah.
So I don't think it makes that much of a difference because I know that they're for different markets. The journal article is for a different market, the book is for a different market. So it doesn't make a huge difference. What I would say is that don't give the game away in a journal article. Don't condense your book into a journal article so that if someone was approaching your research and they said, oh, well, I could either read that 300-page book or the 20-page journal article, what are they going to do? Mm-hmm. So what you want the journal article to be more like a taster of the content that's going to be in the book, because that's in your best interests as well. You don't want to give it all away in a quick article. You want the book to stand for a longer time afterwards.
She asked a question.
Oh, okay, yeah, no. I did think, because I think there were a lot of questions about, whether we should be splitting up the thesis into journal chapters. And yeah, that's okay, but yeah, don't give away too much information.
I have another question. So I get that in a proposal it's not advisable to use too much theoretical language, but obviously plenty of books have a strong theoretical component. So when it actually comes to, if your proposal is accepted, then where do you stand on like a whole chapter on theory or a whole chapter on a literature review? Is that
a whole chapter on literature review would be asked to be cut.
Right.
I'm trying to find a really dramatic way of saying that, but no, I think it's, when you're reading the books that you read, what you find interesting and what you don't. And usually it is the primary research that the person has done, it's the contribution to the field, not necessarily the synthesis of what's gone before. And what we find as well a lot of the time is librarians are doing book-in-hand assessments of the books that they want to buy for the library. So they will return it if they think it's not suitable. And a lot of the time, a long theory chapter or a long literature review, or it's not as applicable here, but anything like graphs, or for the political scientists in America, equations, no thanks. Anything like that, when the librarian's flicking through the book, they will see that and think, yeah, it's not quite appropriate, or it might be a little bit too high level for our collection. So, of course, the subject of the book may need to have a lot of theory and a lot of that sort of elements in it, but what I would say is try and focus on how it's what you're adding to the field as opposed to sort of the sort of synthesis of what's around it.
I have a question about copyright, and I'm wondering, for example, if you want to have a painting from a museum in your book, or in a proposal, does the author go about getting that copyright by him or herself, or does the publisher help getting that sort of?
It completely depends. Some collections do free copyright for academic books, and so that's easily done and really quick to sort out. I would say for a first book, with an untried and untested author, the publisher will probably ask the author to secure that. Once you're getting into a fourth or fifth book and you've got a little bit more of an author platform and have got more of a following, and that feeds into a lot of what Rob was saying earlier about impact, about sort of the author's reputation or ability to have an impact. Once that's happened, the publisher will probably do it for you. But it just takes that little bit of time.
How much of a leap can you, I mean, I don't know if you can answer this question, but you know, if you did your dissertation on something, and then for your first book you decide to do something that's related, of course, but that's kind of a leap. Is that something that you guys kind of discourage, or do you kind of do you ask, for example, to see what the dissertation was about, or do you ask to see the dissertation? Do you know what I mean?
Yeah,
like
yeah. I
the
mean,
first book project.
we're kind of mercenaries. We're all right with it. It's book a book. You know, as long as it's making a good contribution, we're quite pleased to talk to someone about that and to see the proposal. It would just depend on whether it went through the review process well or not, really. I'm not sure it would matter that much whether it was, and in fact it doesn't, and we published recently someone's first book that was sort of a course book as opposed to that sort of monographic conversion of the PhD. So I think as long as the subject matter is good, as long as it goes through the review process, it doesn't matter.
I was just wondering, obviously, out of the Mesnet, we would like for new partnerships to be created. How would CUP welcome the idea of, for example, some of our presenters collaborating in some sort of, you know, I don't know, proceedings or a collection of contributions? Would that be feasible or quite?
If I was at Ivy Taurus, if you'd got me 6 months ago, I would have said yes. Cambridge doesn't particularly like conference proceedings. They do sell less. And so we kind of, editor collections or that kind of symposia workshops are not so encouraged. And I know I'm being filmed right now, so I shouldn't say this, but someone like Routledge probably would, or Ivy Taurus probably would, but you didn't hear that from me.
Okay.
At the back.
How do you select the reviewers?
So something that I generally do is once the proposals come in or the manuscripts come in, and I've sort of been speaking to, say, you about your book manuscript, I would ask if you had any suggestions as to whom it might be suitable to start off the process with. It's always blind; you will never know who it was, but that's kind of a useful way to know what kind of field you're positioning your book in as well. And also, Middle Eastern studies is a wonderful but sometimes quite a political field in which to work. And so sometimes it's kind of useful to know, oh, okay, they're situating it on that side of the argument, say, and not necessarily on another. So it's kind of interesting to know, to get your feedback from it. And then a lot of the times it's a little bit like a little sort of daisy chain of sort of moving around. Someone says, no, I can't do it, but they probably can, and then you go to them. So you tend to end up sending around 10 or 12 emails to get the 2 reviewers. So that's what we'll be doing sort of behind the scenes.
Yeah, what sort of impact has electronic publication had on you as an institute and your authors and how they relate?
Okay, I mean, e-publishing and e-books have had a really different impact on the publishing industry as a whole. So on the sort of popular fiction end, it's completely revolutionised it. Absolutely. Someone like Mills and Boon have had their profits go up enormously because of e-books, because you don't have to have the book out on the tube anymore. You can just have the Kindle or whatever reader of your choice. In academic publishing, it's had less of a huge impact. I think it's the value of the book product is still extremely high. People really like to have it, people like to hold it, people like to give it as a present. Your mums and dads will love to buy it. And so it's had less of it, but it's still there, and it's still important. And what I would say is it's quite important to reach into different areas of the world, actually, and especially with something like Middle Eastern studies, where there are people in the region that want to be reading or want to have access to this, to your books, to your texts. Then it's quite useful in that sense. And I mean, in terms of there's a lot of what the company does with sort of online marketing, e-marketing of the book as well, and sort of really promotes it through those channels, and suggests that, you know, something like a website that goes alongside the book that, say, has additional reading material or any sort of additional thoughts that have happened post-publication on the subject matter, that those two can sort of coincide and sort of inform each
So
other.
could you say that today, if you publish a book in a hard copy, it will be published electronically as well, or
Oh,
not
yeah.
necessary?
Yeah,
For sure.
yeah, absolutely, yeah. Yeah, no, it's a standard at Cambridge, I know, of they come out at the same time.
I'm just going to take one more question, and then any more questions from Maria we can have do over lunch. So
Yeah, thank you. I'm still in a middle or early middle of my PhD, so I haven't really been thinking about writing up and not being publishing a book. But I don't really get the actual process, how it looks like, and it a bit looks like to me that there's if you enter it and you're in the middle of writing a book, there's no guarantee, right, that it's going to be published in the end, and also what is the editor's role in the process? So, and how do you actually work for the person who's writing the first book?
Okay, I mean, the thing is that the first book a lot of the time will be based on your PhD dissertation. So despite what sort of the question there, that's usually how it works with academic sort of books. So you will have a body of text already, and you will be in discussion with your PhD advisors about how one might think about turning that into a book, and talking to sort of commissioning editors at, say, conferences or things like that. You'll get sort of a feel for what kind of level of book people are looking for. So say somewhere like Brill would be really happy for it to be quite high level and quite sort of, not jargonistic, but that sort of higher end of things. So I mean, with certain publishing houses, they work in different ways. So some will give you a contract on proposal, others will want to do the review process before contract. So it really depends on which one that you decided to go for. And I think what Ian was sort of saying about really doing the research and knowing what the requirements are of the department for something like ref is really important for you as well to know. And as a total aside, we publishers hate ref as much as you do. It makes life difficult for us too. So, well, what you're saying about sort of having a book without any guarantee that it will be published, it's not quite like that, because there will be sort of you will be in discussion with say me at one place and say we're not as fussy about proposals being submitted to multiple publishers. Manuscripts being submitted, once the manuscript is in a review process, that then should really be for one publisher only. But at proposal stage, you can be in contact with sort of a few people, see how you feel about that, and I mean, there's never a guarantee. There isn't, because you could get the contract, at proposal stage, but then the manuscript doesn't go, suit the reviewers, and you would then have to, manage that or pull out of that. So there's never a guarantee for publishing. It's sadly not a right. But people are. Our editor's job is to hold your hand, especially through the first, and that sort of goes into your second question there. Is to hold your hand through the process. We're there to answer questions. We're there to help you sort of jump through the hoops of the review process of our sales and marketing teams. So as much as you can, sort of do email. I mean, that's my job, is to sort of answer your questions and to the best of my ability. And so, it's never a stupid question as well. Especially if it's your first book, how are you going to know what the process is? That's what your editor is there for. That's what we're there to help you through. And so yeah, a lot of it is that sort of hand-holding process is what people like me are there to do. And mostly with sort of the larger market books, we would have quite a hand in the development of the text as well. With something like a PhD thesis that's been converted into the first book, there's less of that involvement because there's already a text there and it's already got the sort of stamp of approval from the university, so there's less of a need for us to get quite so involved. But later on down the line, when you're sort of mid-writing or mid-development of an idea, then we're quite happy to answer questions about that and sort of talk you through that.
Any more questions, I think we'll take into lunch break because Maria's going to be staying for the rest of the day. So I'd like to thank Maria for really interesting insight into